drafted. They closed enlistment because the draft boys were complaining they couldn't get enough people to fill the slots that they were required to. That was my understanding. So I was drafted. I volunteered for the draft.
I don't know where you'd like to put this.
How did you feel like when you went into overseas?
What part of the war?
Well, like when you went overseas, when you were told you were actually leaving.
I think there were two thoughts in my mind. One was apprehension. That's a little bit scary, but not really afraid. The other is terror. And apprehension is when you're going into combat, and terror is when the bombs, the shells start falling around. That is quite scary. I don't know if that answers your question.
How old were you when you went into the war?
18.
Where'd you go for like your first few weeks when you were in the service?
Oh, we went to Camp McCain, Mississippi. Infantry.
Did you make any like close friendships?
One, he was killed in the
When you left, did you have any family? Like, did you leave your parents or like
Oh,
brothers
yes.
or sisters
Parents,
here?
brother, and sister.
Do you have a wife and a
18. We didn't marry that young.
What was like some of your jobs?
Mostly walking,
Really?
carrying a gun. I was an infantryman, a rifleman. When I got overseas, I was assigned to a machine gun. That was my primary concern.
Did you have like a lot of pride saying that you were fighting for the U.S.?
Yes. I had a lot of concern that I would measure up to whatever was expected of me. Sounds strange maybe, but I was very concerned that I would be able to do what was expected of me.
What did you do for like entertainment?
In this country, nothing. We didn't get out of the camp. Once I got out, and the primary purpose was to buy a quart of milk. They didn't serve much milk. I like milk. When I went overseas, I went to England, so we spent some time there. We were able to go to the movies. They called it the variety. It was like a vaudeville show and things like that. Dancing, they had a dance hall. So that's what we did there. But in this country, I didn't go out very often.
Sorry to interrupt, but your teacher wants you to write your answers down and stuff like that. Notes. Okay?
How did you keep in touch with your family? Did you write to them?
Right,
How
yes.
often did you?
Once a week, probably. There were times when you couldn't write that often. When you're on board ship, of course, it took a couple of weeks to get there, and a couple of weeks to get home, and I don't know how the mail went. I wrote, the night before I was wounded, I wrote to my parents. And I wrote to the girl that I ended up marrying. I didn't know I was going to marry her then.
How exactly did you get wounded?
Well, I was sitting one morning, October 2nd, 1944, behind a machine gun. It was quiet, no noise, no shooting, nothing going on. Across the field, out of range of the rifles, were the Germans making breakfast. And I was quite relaxed watching them, wondering what was coming, and I didn't know there was one behind me. And fortunately for me, he was a lousy shot because he took a shot at me and missed me. And that made me move, and I moved just enough so the second shot missed me and would have killed me. It hit me in the back of the head. It came out the side of my face. So it was a serious wound.
What kind of treatment did they give you for that?
Well, the medic came, got me out of there, and took me to some aid station in the woods somewhere. But then I put me on the stretcher and took me by ambulance to, trying to think where we were. It was a bombed out building they took us to, a whole bunch of us, but the British took over, and I was handled by the British medics while I was in the continent of Europe.
What was the actual invasion of Holland like?
Well, I've written all this down. I sent a copy of the chapter that I wrote to Mrs. Ketzer. So I don't know how much it tells you, but it was the idea of General Montgomery, who was a British general, that they could capture the bridges across the rivers in Holland and get the Allied troops across the rivers into Germany faster and end the war. But as it was, it failed. It was probably the only mission. The Americans didn't fail, but the British operation failed. So it did not work, I thought, and it did not shorten the war. That's all. I don't know if that's enough answer. I don't know if you have some more. You have to lead me. You want more information.
When you got wounded, like, you were just sitting there watching them and you weren't actually, like, fighting anybody?
Nope. And whatever hit me picked me up and threw me right out of my hole. So it was, I didn't know what hit me. I thought it was, and I was afraid, I felt the blood running down my face. And I was afraid to put my hand up to see where I was wounded because I didn't know how bad it was. And I assumed, this sounds funny, but I assumed I was going to die. I felt very calm, very peaceful. No fear, no nothing. And after a few minutes, I just decided I was going to die, and then I got frightened. Figure that out, I can't.
Was anybody with you when you were wounded?
No.
You were all by yourself?
Well, I say all by myself. There was nobody right close to me. Nobody knew I was wounded.
How long did it take for people to realize that you were wounded and kind of
Oh, I would imagine 5 or 10 minutes. Because then I decided I wasn't going to die. I better call for the medic, and they came, patched me up, well, covered me up with bandage and stuff. Gave me a shot of morphine.
What happened to the German soldier who shot you?
They captured him that afternoon. They were getting bothered so much by shots from the rear that they turned the machine gun around and fired it into a haystack, and he came out of the haystack. They didn't kill him, as far as I know. But I didn't know this until 4 or 5 months after I was wounded. I met someone from my unit in the hospital with me, curiously, all those months later.
What was your most memorable experience
Where?
during the operation?
You mean while we were in combat, or in the service?
Well, you were in combat.
It's hard to say. It's hard to say. I was impressed with the Dutch people. As we moved down the roads, they stood on the side where they could and waved to us and gave us apples. They were happy to see us. They, I remember I could speak a little German, so I was called back one day to talk to some Dutch people who didn't really understand me. It sounds the same, but it isn't quite the same. And my officer wanted me to get a room in the house. I ended up with the whole house. But they were very frightened that the Germans would be back. But they did show me that their pictures on the wall were ordinary scenes, like whatever you'd have in a house, and then when you turn them over, they were all religious scenes. Apparently the Germans don't like the religious idea, you know what I'm saying? But that's all. I remember after the war was over, long after it was over, I was in Canada parading. And some man, after the parade was over, stopped us and he said, I am 40 years late, but I want to tell you, I saw you come out of the skies. And he said, you drove out the Germans. You drove out the Germans. You saved us.
How did that make you feel?
Oh, it kind of touched, very much.
What kind of food did you eat?
Food, terrible. We were fed apparently by the British Army. They had what they call 14-in-1s. In other words, it was a box of rations that was supposed to feed 14 men one day. But all I can remember, there must have been other varieties, but all I can remember is oxtail stew. If you ever try to eat the bones of a tail from an ox, I wonder if they went through and cut the tails off all the cows in England and put them in cans. I don't know. It didn't taste bad, it didn't chew it. It's all bone and gristle. But we survived. We survived.
What was your actual job? Like, did you have any specific assignments?
No, mine was I carried the barrel of the machine gun and a box of ammo.
That was all?
Well, when you're ready to fire it, somebody else would have a mount, and then somebody else, what they call the receiver, that's the main part on it. I'd screw in the barrel, and we'd get the ammunition out of the can, or it came in already like 10 bombs. So that was my job.
What effects did it have on you personally to know that you were like killing the Germans?
Well, I don't know if I killed anyone. I fired at them. I don't know. I don't think it ever bothered me. Not that I'm hard-hearted. I don't mean that. But it was a war, and those things happen in wars, you know. So I can remember firing my rifle, not the machine gun. Firing my rifle, but I don't. I never give a thought. I don't know if I even killed one. You know, if I did, that's great. But if I did, then that was part of the job too.
How did being in the war and being wounded affect the rest of your life after?
I really don't know how to answer that. I'm a super patriot. You play the right music and I'm ready to go off marching off to the army again. Although I think if I went my age now, they'd laugh at me, call I'm so old. But I'm a super patriot. I've always been, but especially now.
Where were you living before you went to war?
Oh, in New York State, on Long Island. I'm from Long Island originally. If that makes any difference to you.
Did you receive any special medals or citations for your service?
No, only what everyone else did, except the Purple Heart. Did I get any ones for bravery? I didn't last long enough. I only lasted 2 weeks. I was wounded. One of my friends got wounded coming in. See, we went in gliders. You never heard of gliders. Did you? You did? I'm going to leave this here. Someday you want to put it on a VCR and look at it. I copied it. I suppose I violated the copyright laws. I don't know. It gives you an idea. Most people never heard of gliders. Now they use helicopters. But they used to tow us in and cut us loose, and then you went. Of course, they didn't like where you were going to land. It's too big, and you had no motor to pull up. Or some of them crashing in, I'll tell you that. But, no, I was mainly concerned, I've thought about this a lot since I got older, because I have more time to do things like this. But I was very concerned that I would do what I was expected to do. You know what I'm saying? I wouldn't let anybody down. That was very... That I do my duty when I had to do it. That's the main thing I do.
How were you greeted when you came back?
We were greeted well. World War II guys were heroes, not like Vietnam. No, I was sent back on a hospital ship. So I was in a hospital 18 months. And I sent me to Cleveland, Ohio. And I told you we lived on Long Island. So I met my father in New York City. He worked in New York City, and we went home together. I took another train out. I was very well greeted. I know my father, but I was glad to see them.
What was your job when you came back? Like, what was your career?
My career? Well, I wanted to go back to college. I had some college before I went into service, and I wanted to be a doctor. So I went back and I worked my full head off. I didn't do badly. I was a student after the war. I wasn't that great before. So I was a student, and I married my wife, and she was a nurse, and I thought, I don't want to go to school anymore. I'm tired of it. So I thought, what do I do with this now? So I went to teach school. So I applied for a job, and the only one who would hire me at that time was Orchard Park. So we moved up from Long Island to Orchard Park. Here, after here. Back in 49. Chemistry, physics, and biology. Towards the end. I enjoyed it.
How does it feel to come back here?
Great, great. I find myself dreaming about this place. Most of the time I come to school here in mornings and I can't find my room, lost, or or somebody left the lights off, or I go to the cafeteria and I have candles and tablecloths. I don't know. I don't know where I'm getting these ideas. No, it's great.
Did you have any other friends who were drafted who went into the war with you?
Not at the same time. Yeah, I have a whole bunch, all the kids I grew up with. But I never saw any of them again. One of them I did, but none of the others. I don't know what happened. When I came back from the war, maybe they weren't back. I had to get to business in school and study. And then, of course, when I graduated, I moved up here from Long Island, so I never saw any of them again except one person. He lives in Florida. I've seen him.
Do you still keep in touch with him?
Yes.
Were you just a soldier? Did you have a special rank?
No, just PFC, private first class. I did get approved for officers candidate school, but I never got there.
How many battles were you involved in?
I don't know if there was a battle. It was like one continuous one, rather than several specific ones. I only lasted 2 weeks, so it wasn't a lot of battles. I laughed because ironically, because a friend of mine that I met in England got wounded on the way in the glider. So I saw him carried out of the glider on a stretcher. I never even got to see here one shot fired, except the one that came through the gliders. They were only, like bicycle frames and canvas. Full of holes by the time we landed. Wow.
For the 2 weeks that you were in there, was it like hard physically?
Yeah, and we didn't eat much. Of course, I smile now because it was a good thing. I hadn't eaten for several days before I got wounded, and maybe that was good because they don't want you to eat when they're going to do surgery on you, as you probably know if you've had any. And mine was done by the British in Brussels, Belgium. I laugh. I got to tell you this because I think it's funny. I don't know whether I fell asleep or passed out, but when I was carried, apparently, when I was carried from the ambulance into the hospital in Brussels, they laid me on the floor in a stretcher. And when I woke up, all I could see were men's legs, short pants, and very fancy socks with tassels hanging on them. And I couldn't understand the language, and I said, oh my gosh, I'm dead, I'm going to be judged by God, and I can't even understand the language. What they were Belgian Boy Scouts. So boys, 16, 17, 18 years old, and they were carrying the stretchers from the ambulance into the hospital. Finally, I realized what they were. But for a while there, I was a little bit worried.
How was your time in the hospital?
Not bad. I mean, good food, good bed. I could walk. I wasn't confined to my bed very long. A day or two at a time, perhaps, but I was ambulatory, so it wasn't bad. I was quite long, except for the surgery I went through. And that was always, except for the British, that was always local. They always laid me on the table and gave me needles in the face and sewed me up, In fact, I had an operation a month ago. My wound started acting up again. After 58 years, can you imagine? So,
Did you meet anyone in the hospital that you'd like go and talk to when you were there and stuff? Keep you company?
oh yeah, we always made new friends. Yeah, I met one fellow from my squad 4 or 5 months after I was wounded in the same hospital. He was wounded several months, 4 or 5 months after I was, and ended up in the same hospital in Cleveland. So that's when I found out when it hit me. A bullet hit me. I thought it was shrapnel. So I didn't know. You don't know. It hit me. I didn't know a little teeny bullet could pick you up and throw you. But it can. It has a tremendous impact, I guess.
Did you like Roosevelt as our president? Did you agree with his idea of going to the war?
Oh yes, of course we all did. Those days we didn't question it.
How did you feel when he died?
Sad. I was in a movie theater when they stopped the movie and turned the lights on in Cleveland. And come to think of it, I don't know where I met her. I dated somebody in the Waves, never saw again. Don't even know where I met her or how I got a date with her. I remember because I wasn't married or anything. I wasn't even home with my wife. And she was sitting next to me. Everyone was sad. She's your president, you know.
Yeah.
But that's the way it goes.
On your way to invade Holland, what emotions were you going through?
You say to that, what was that?
What emotions were you going through?
Not much of any. I know it sounds funny, but I said there were two kinds of concern. I call one apprehension. Well, it's like you have a dental appointment. You're not so sure about it. When you get in the chair, then maybe you get terror when you find out he hurts you a little bit. So going into Holland was kind of exciting. We were flying. We got across the English Channel, and then the bullets started hitting the glider. I must have been hit seriously 400 or 500 times. Not one of us got a scratch. And you could see the holes in the fabric, and hear the popping of the bullets going through. And then the ack started, and every time one went off close to you, it would throw the glider one way or throw it the other way. But it was just apprehension. Terror came when we're lying in the woods and the shells were going off, and I thought it was a thunderstorm. Here's my stuff. I don't know if it's really of any value. Take a look at it.
Oh, yeah. Okay, yes.
I don't know.
Yes.
And this I'm leaving with you. You can throw it away. That shows gliders.
Okay.
Most people never saw or heard of gliders. We were lying in the woods and the shells went off, and it was like a thunder and lightning storm with the crashing and the booming and the flash of light, and then when the shrapnel, the broken up shells went through the trees, it sounded like rain. So I was biting into the ground with my mouth and with my fingers, I tell you. That was scary. If every one of them hit you, you'd be done, you know? But the other way, night before I was moved, I was running down the road and they were shooting at us like crazy. I was carrying a machine gun barrel in this hand, the ammunition in this hand, and my rifle was slung on my back, and I was concerned but not really terribly frightened. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Particularly when you're busy. It's when you're not doing anything that you have to kind of suffer through it, you know?
Did you see anyone get wounded?
Yes, the night before I was wounded again, I was based, and the night before I was wounded, it was raining, and it had stopped raining, and the moon came out. And we moved up this road that was like daylight, the moon was so bright. And then they started dropping some mortars on us, and I dropped to the ground and right next to an American corpse. I didn't see him get shot, but he had just been shot. And I thought, oh, gee, that could be me. You feel sad. Just like today in Iraq, guys are dying.
Besides the time when you were wounded and you felt like you were going to die, was there any other time you felt like you were going to die? Were you scared about coming close to it if something was going to hit you?
No, I didn't think about it much afterwards. At the time, I didn't know. I told you, I sat behind my machine gun, bleeding like crazy, and thought I was going to die, and felt very calm, very collected. Nothing flashed before my eyes. And all of a sudden I figured to myself, maybe I'm going to die. Then I got afraid. And I got really terror-stricken. And I yelled for the medic. And when he put a bandage on me and gave me a shot of morphine, cut my sleeve, stuck with morphine. He says, okay, let's go. And I said, nope, I'm not leaving the hole. He says, come on, you got to get out of here. I said, I'm not leaving the hole. He says, come on. I said, okay. And I grabbed my rifle. I said, oh, you can't take your rifle. I said, I can't take my rifle. You're non-combatant. I said, oh, they're going to kill me. You're going to kill the both of us. He said, come on, let's go. So he yanked me out of the hole. We walked up the road. I can still see him. They shelled us. They shelled us. They didn't let us. He was killed that afternoon, I understand, by a water shell. I don't think the Germans did. They shot at medics. The Japanese did. I don't think the Germans did. But water shell, poor guy. Because he said to me, you're out of money. Well, the first thing he said to me when I called him, he came to look at me, he said, holy Christmas. He didn't say Christmas. It was so close. He said, your face is a mess. That's good talk. I I had a broken jaw, so
Why didn't you want to get out of the hole?
afraid to get shot. Yeah, we were already shot. Already thought I was going to die. No, I was afraid. Figure it out. I can't figure it out.
What did you think of those ranked above you?
People were above me. I met a few I thought were idiots. Yes, well, most of them I think were very competent. Yeah, I did. I ran. Well, it's a long story. It doesn't matter. We had an officer in this country, in Mississippi. Everyone really loved him, and he always got in trouble. So they got rid of him, sent him overseas. And when I went overseas, the first person I met when I got off the train in England was this guy. He was in the same unit I was. Although, when I say same division, airborne division, but a different unit. He was killed, I understand, in Normandy. See, I arrived just before Normandy. Didn't go in on Normandy because they didn't need to. We were brought in as advanced replacements. They figured there were going to be heavy casualties. And they wanted us trained and ready to go, and unfortunately, they didn't have, well, they had heavy casualties and didn't have as many as they thought they would. So I wasn't sent. I was glad of that because I wouldn't have known anyone I was fighting. At least by the time I got to Holland, I knew the guys, you know, who they were.
When you were out of combat and you were hearing about like the war and how it was going, how did you feel? Were you like, did you know that the Allies were going to win?
Oh yeah, by that time. I think one of the most, you asked me earlier and I hadn't thought of it, one of the things that struck me most, I think was D-Day itself. I'm sorry to say, I was stationed at a racetrack in Oadby, England. The main unit was poised on the airfields. We were the advanced replacements. And I was at my usual job, KP, and they announced the invasion had begun. I was everyone. Civilians that I met that day and ourselves in this camp, the few of us that were there were very concerned that it go, that would be successful. This was it. This was the big one. So that was one of the most striking moments I think of my career in England was the D-Day's announcement. And I had the glorious job of washing pots and pans or something. I don't know how they knew I was good at that. My mother never made me do it. The Army knew I was good at it.
Did you go anyplace else besides England and Holland?
No. Well, yes, I went through to Belgium. Yeah. I was taken to a hospital in Holland, and they told us that we were probably going to be surrounded and captured by the Germans because the British, where the mission failed, we were supposed to drop behind the German lines. And here's the Germans, and the British were supposed to come up on the ground and meet us. And they never got there. And so we ran the risk of being captured. And I thought, oh, gee, I don't want to be treated by the Germans. They might be good, but I don't want to be treated by the Germans. But as it was, they did join up with us, and the Americans were able to break out of this area we were surrounded, because airborne troops are always surrounded wherever they go, until the ground troops break through, and I got out of there. Then I was handled, I told you, by the British, until I was operated by the British in Brussels, then I flown to England, and then the American doctors took over the American hospital in England. So my big job was to close up my face, because I was really laid over.
Did you have any other family members who went into the war, or was it just you?
My immediate family, my brother was too young. He went in after the war. He was drafted after the war. But yes, I had cousins. Oh gosh, I had all kinds of cousins. Everybody I knew was in the service. Except the kid across the street. And his father kept him out until the women on the street used to stop and wonder why he wasn't in. My son's in, why aren't you? So, I mean, you gotta watch out for women, you know, they get mad when their boys are in the service. and you're not, you know? So he finally got in a year or two after me. He should have been in a year before me. But that's all right, that's his business.
Was it considered like shameful to not go in the service?
Oh, yeah. I knew a fella, I don't know what his problem was. He was called 4F. 4F meant you were unfit for military service. He was heartbroken. He wanted to very badly. They wouldn't take him. Maybe they did towards the war's nearest end. I don't know, because they would begin to take a lot of people that normally wouldn't take, you know. But I don't know whatever happened.
So a lot of people back home didn't, like, when they saw someone who wasn't in the war and they were over.
They'd stop you and ask you why you weren't in.
So they were really critical about this.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes. Not me. I was in early, you know, at the same time anybody else would have been in. But, yes, I know they went across the street, especially I was asked, he told me. That was just something he had to answer to himself, you know what I mean? I don't think he ever went in harm's way anyway. He went in the Navy, you know. Not that the Navy was a ball of, let's say, just fun and games. It wasn't. They had to have problems too, you know that.
Were your parents like scared?
My father never said anything. My mother was. In fact, when I wanted to enlist, she was what I said. I had a nasty argument, fight, but I'm ashamed of it. Because I was 17, I wanted to enlist, and she would let me. Then I had a chance to join some sort of a program where the Navy would send you to school, and when you graduated, you were an officer in the Navy, and she wouldn't sign me up for that either. When I was 18, she never knows, she's gone, she's passed away now, she doesn't know I went down and I signed up for the draft, and I said, how do I go in right away? They said, well, just sign this paper for here, so I signed that. A month later, I was gone. My mother still was gone. I mean, I would have been drafted eventually, but I volunteered to go. I thought we should be in it. I didn't find it so bad. It was a real education for a little kid like me. I was only a kid, you know. I enjoyed it. I think I was surprised to meet people I should have known. I'm not supposed to be a smart boy. I met fellas in the Army that couldn't read and write. You know, I mean, but there were some, from the South especially. Mexican Americans were, a couple of them were troublemakers. Not because they were Mexican Americans, I guess they had a chip on their shoulder for one reason or another. But we all got along. We got along.
Would you like help them write letters or something to their families sometimes?
No, I never had to do that. Some of the guys did. It was, now this is an American guy, kid who couldn't really, I don't think he could write or read. So one of the fellows was actually from Canada, but he was an American citizen. And he used to write letters for him to his girlfriend, this boy's fellow's girlfriend, saying like, your eyes are like limpid pools, your smile is like the Mona Lisa. This kid he was writing letters for never knew what he was talking about, and I don't know if the girl knew what he was talking about either. The fellows who were blinded when we were in the hospital, we wrote letters for them, read the letters. Some of them were sad. I remember one fellow got a letter from his girlfriend saying she didn't want to be married to a blind fellow, so goodbye. Another woman wrote, and she was married to him, and said, well now, I'm sorry you're blinded, but now you can sit in the backyard and enjoy it. You know, so there's different attitudes, you know. I can't blame a young woman wanting to take on a man who's blinded, you know, young. Although he was beginning to see somewhat, I understand, because he came in one day with a big welt in his forehead. He was walking from our ward someplace else, and there were, like a canopy overhead with posts. And he used to count, see the shadows of the posts, and he counted so many posts and turned, and he missed the count, and walked right into them. So you could see some shadow. You know.
Was there any like tricks you guys played on each other, or like jokes or anything?
Yeah, for a while they used to short sheet me. Well, the beds were folding beds, and they took them just enough so by the time you got into bed it collapsed. I get a little bit upset over that. The short sheeting was the worst thing. That was, you ever heard of that? Yeah, can't get your feet down on the machine. We got along pretty well, I think we did.
When you told, well, how did you find out that you were going into the war?
Got a letter from, he didn't know he sent it to me, but from the president, greetings, it says, to advise you that you are subject to call. So my father drove me to the next town for what they called a pre-induction physical, just to see if I could see or what my heartbeat was. I guess things, minor things like that. And then on a certain day, I had to go into New York City, where thousands of us. And they examined us, and I can remember the whole line of us going by these groups. And I was there, all right, the next 24 go to the Air Force. The next 30 go to the Marines. The next 50 go to the Army. So everybody was drafted, it seems, into every branch of the service at that instant. But I was a little bit disappointed. I was pre-med in college, and I thought maybe I could get in the medical corps. They wouldn't put me in the medical corps.
Was it really emotional when you were leaving? Like you and your family?
Yeah, somewhat. I was kind of excited about it because I didn't know what it was about. I didn't know anything about the Army. What did I know? You know, I didn't know you got home. And the only thing I can remember, I was waiting to stand by the train. My mother and father, my sister and brother. It was a cold, damp, rainy morning, nasty morning. And I was thinking to myself, well, when am I going to get home again? Will I ever get home again? I don't know. I didn't know they gave you leave. So I get on the train, I was going to get on the train and wave out the window, and I started up before I could ever get to a window, so I never, I was gone. And we went to a place called Camp Upton on Long Island, and then in 4 days I was sent to Mississippi. So I remember pulling into a train station, and there were a train next to us, and there were two young women, and one of them was like, where are you going, We didn't know where we were going. So we kind of signaled, where were we? We didn't even know where we were. And so one of them took her lipstick out, wrote on a newspaper, you're in Pittsburgh. So we obviously went from Long Island through Pennsylvania, Pittsburgh, and angled down to Mississippi. It's, where is it? Grenada, Mississippi. Grenada. I never heard of it before either. We always said, if they found a place they could put men, had all kinds of bugs, snakes, vermin, hot as blazes in the summer and cold as the dickens in the winter. That's where they put an army camp. We had a sense of humor. You also learned at nights, you're sitting, if it was a summer night, you're sitting in your back steps to the barracks and you see some sergeant or some officer come in the other end of the barracks, you disappear because you knew he was looking for somebody to do some work.
How are the sleeping conditions?
Well, all right. When you're young, you sleep on anything. I was amazed, though, how many guys smoke during the night. Yeah, if I woke up during the night, you see these cigarettes glowing, and well, they could set the whole place on fire. In England, we slept on straw. We took mattress covers and we filled them about that deep with straw, and after you laid on 1 or 2 nights, it was about this thick and hard as this tabletop. But it was all right. As I say, you can sleep anywhere when you're tired.
What did you do for entertainment? I don't know if we asked that.
You asked that.
Okay.
I didn't do much of anything. We went to the movies in the States. It was only 15 cents, so I went to every movie. But we were kept pretty busy day and night. Seriously, we had guard duty or something at night. I went to town once to buy a quart of milk, and my buddy and I sat on the front steps of the store and drank the milk. Couldn't get much milk in the Army. I like my milk. And in England, of course, we were much closer to town, right in the towns. So we could go to the movies, we could go to what they call the varieties, little shows, we could go dancing. They had a dance hall there, a very respectable place where you could go meet a girl you didn't even know and dance with them in the evening. She'd go her way, you'd go your way home. We kind of liked it. But sometimes we drank too much. They took me out one night, got me, I don't know why I drank it, because I don't like the taste of stuff. Why was I sick? Never again. Never again.
Is there anyone you like met when you were out that you remember? Like,
Where, in England? Yeah, I met a few people, but it's what, almost 60 years ago. It's gone. Never kept in touch with them. No, I haven't. We were at odds ends with the British anyway. Not the people. They liked us. They liked us very much. The soldiers hated us. And in some ways I can't blame them. We sometimes were arrogant. We had too much money. We were nicer to the girls. Really, we had a way with us. And but I belong to a group today that has a number of people who were in the British Army, and they become quite friendly. You know, we've become quite good friends. And I think to myself, why how stupid I was to be angry at each other, you know?
was it ever the point that they'd like get into fights?
Oh,
like,
yes, they were.
Dancing?
Yeah. Yeah, they were always looking for a fight. Well, we were. Actually, my unit's airborne was always taught to fight. Because we were supposed to be tougher than everybody else. And so, this is the... I thought I was tougher than everybody else. I wasn't. I thought I was. It's pride, just like the Marines. It's a great outfit. The Marines are, every outfit's a great outfit. But they're taught they're better than everybody else. They think they are. And so they are. So that, you know, same with us.
Your friend that was killed in Italy,
Yeah.
how did you find out that he was killed? Did you hear about it?
No, I sent him a letter.
Oh, you sent him a letter.
Yeah. He borrowed, I think in this country, he borrowed $10 from me. And he was sent to Italy, and I was sent to England, about a week apart. And I was writing to him, and my cousin, I had a cousin in the same outfit this fellow was in. And I wrote to East and told them to meet each other. And they never got around to it. And then I wrote to my friend Mike, and the letter came back, killed in action. And what kind of upset me was that a week after that, I received a letter from the mail clerk in his unit with a $10 bill. In other words, he had arranged to mail me the $10 he owed me, and I had written, said, forget the $10. He had arranged to send the $10 to me, and before it got to me, he was killed. I felt sorry because he was the sole support of his family. He had a younger sister, a retarded brother, and I guess his father was crippled, so I don't know what that family did. They were from Pittsburgh. But we were very close. We met by fist fight. Don't ask me what we were doing. And we started laughing at each other and sat down, and then we were friends. I don't know why. I don't know.
Did you like write a lot to your wife now?
Well, yes. Any young woman who had a friend, male friend, in the service wrote to him, whether it was a boyfriend or not. She wrote to him because that was her patriotic duty, keeping the morale up. She was not my girlfriend. She's just a girl I knew. And I didn't get going with her until I came home from overseas.
Was she like maybe your best girlfriend? Or no?
Wasn't even my girlfriend. There are other girls I like better. And then, well, I went to see her graduate from nurses training. She invited me only because she was the only girl in her class not going steady. And they called her to class partner. So she thought, gosh, none of her girlfriends are going to have a boyfriend there. Nobody. They can't make it. They're all overseas. Where could I find a guy that could go to my graduation? So I was the only one she knew that was bad. So she invited me, and I figured, it'll kill Dee. She's a nice girl. I took one look at her, and that was it. That night I told her I was going to marry her. I'm 20 years old. We did get married that year. I got a good one. I want to tell her. Just swim it.
What was your reaction to Pearl Harbor?
Stunned. We had a Sandlot football game, and I went over to pick up a guy. We had a game. And it was on the radio while he was getting ready to go, and I drove over to the lot where we were going to play. We never got to play the game. We sat on the ground talking about it. Never realized, of course, that all of us were going to be in it. I was only 17 years old. I didn't get it, but I was. And well, that was frightening. And of course, then you found out there were people from your hometown that were killed there. They were in the Navy. It's a tragedy. It really was.
Was there a lot of resentment against like Japanese who
Oh,
lived
sure.
in?
I'm sure. Yes.
When you came back, like, did you feel that towards anyone, like the Germans or anyone?
I still feel that way against, no, more against the Japs, because what they did to our prisoners, American prisoners, they were terrible. Well, that's 50 years ago, so I suppose it's all over. But then they treated, in defense of them, I understand, they treated their own people the same bad way. They starved American prisoners, you know that. Men died by the, you ever heard of the Baton Death March? Where the guy stumbled and they bayoneted him and threw him in the ditch. We didn't do that, personally.
Did you agree with us bombing Japan?
They didn't ask me. Yeah, I think so. I think that at the time the talk was that there may be 1 million American casualties captured in Japan. Now, how do you tell a wife or a mother or a sister?
Time out.
Hold on,
How do you tell a loved one that they're going to put their son or brother or wife or rather a husband in harm's way? So, unfortunately, war is stupid in my mind, but war, you're supposed to kill somebody. And that's what you did. I think they did that to make sure Japan surrendered. Because they were going to fight street to street in Japan, you know that. Or at least we believe that. So, now they're our friend. So sometimes you wonder about wars, don't you? It all happens with some men, usually men, they want to run things or dominate things or be dictators. Oh, I don't know. What else you got? You got to lead me.
We used all this.
When you were in the hospital over in Belgium, did you hear the sounds of war?
No. No. In Nijmegen, in the hospital in Nijmegen, in Holland, I did, yes. I also was dropped off someplace. It was kind of interesting because we were lying on the floor in a bombed out building. The roof was gone, the walls were half gone, you know. And that's when the British took over. And I remember a guy asked me if I wanted something to drink. American doctor took care of me when I was first wounded, said I couldn't have anything to drink. And I said, oh yeah. I said, well, we have lemonade. And I thought, no, I've had your lemonade, it's terrible. We have water, we have tea. I said, I thought tea would taste good. So he brought me a pitcher. Yeah, is that what you call it? A teapot is what I would say. A teapot, and told me to suck the tea out of the spout. And I did, and I threw up right away. That's why the American doctor didn't want me to have anything, because I was in shock. I used my helmet for that. So I didn't have anything. So it was a long time before I had anything to eat, which is probably better for me. Yeah. But, no, I don't. When I was taken from the aid station by ambulance to where I think it was Nijmegen Hospital. The shells going off. We were driving like maniacs. I don't know how. In and out, I could feel the thing lurching, ambulance, you know. So I don't know what was going on. And then I can remember when we finally pulled into Brussels. It was a British medic in the ambulance. And he saw me awake and he said he admired American equipment so much. I said, well, what do you like? Well, I what do you like? I don't know. He said he liked sleeping bags. I said, well, pull the blanket off me. There's a sleeping bag there. Take it. I took it. He said, and I said, you see the knife on my trench knife was on my calf from down on my right leg. I said, take that if you want. So I took that. Then when I got into the hospital, I took big shears and cut my clothes off. And threw them all away. You know. It was an interesting experience, believe me.
Were you ever scared, like the Germans were going to use mustard gas or anything?
I wasn't. No, that's the first thing we threw away was the gas mask. Kind of silly when you think about it, but we did. First thing we threw away. Plus, we cut the hose and I wrapped it around my dog tags so they wouldn't clank. But if you wanted anything, you could find it on the ground. Everybody didn't want anything to throw on the ground. You know.
So most people weren't worried about it?
No. Nope. I wasn't a very good cook. I hated their food. I told you that. Oxtail soup, stew. Oh. But this is terrible. One day I was sitting in my foxhole. It was very quiet. I was throwing apples like chickens. And I hit one in the head, and the thing fell over. So I ran over and cut its head off. And then I plucked it, and I gutted it, eviscerated it, found a pot, put it in water and started to boil it. And somebody came along with a piece of cow, dead cows all over the place. I hope he picked one up and left it just lying there dead because it might be bad. And I put a chunk of beef in it, and I was cooking on a smoky fire, and they were trying to get the bridge behind us, the Germans, and the planes were going over and then dropping the bombs and coming back over the orchard I was in. And one time I was there and I didn't know where to go, and the kite had his wings up. He couldn't have been more than 30 feet off the ground. And he came right through the orchard, and I practically looked in his eyes, the German, as he went by, you know. And if he had been strafing, I'd have been dead. But it was awful meat. It didn't taste very good. I didn't cook it very well. But one of the squads I met up with later in my group had 4 or 5 chickens they carried with them. Every time they would lay an egg, they had eggs. If it felt like meat, they butchered a chicken. It sounds cool.
What was the recovery like after you were wounded? Was it painful? Like after your surgery and everything?
Not really. I was lucky. I had no real pain when I was wounded either. Usually serious wounds don't hurt. I mean, it's stiffness, soreness from the sutures, yes, weeks later, but no real pain. I got the $1 million wound. You know what I mean? I could walk. I was laid up in bed very often. Very, very handy.
Did you see anyone who was like injured really bad, who like lost their leg or their arm?
Yeah, there was a couple in our ward. It was a burn case. I didn't hear him until I got to this country. He was really badly burned. He died. I used to see his wife. The Army hospital let her eat meals there when she's sick. And the poor woman was just beside herself because he was, I guess, so bad, her husband. When he finally died, I guess it was a blessing for him because he was pretty sick. There are all kinds of strange. I can one guy in England who one day find about his leg hurt, and they x-rayed it, it was broken. And they apologized for bringing him, when they brought him in wounded, they didn't know he had broken his leg, and he was telling me he didn't break his leg being wounded. What he did was get a pass. He got drunk. And he found a Jeep someplace, and he beat up the MP that was in it, took the Jeep. When he was driving it back to the hospital, he hit a tree with it. And he broke his leg. And he's still wondering who told the Jeep, and you know, here he is, hobbles back to the hospital, and they're apologizing for having missed a broken leg. They were a wild bunch, some of these guys, really crazy. One guy used to gamble everything. He gambled, it's his third time he was wounded. Gambled everything. From money to candy bars to cigarettes. In fact, he was so broke we had to loan him money to buy shaving stuff with. And one day he found a dime. Well, it was a 10-penny bit, they call it. It looked like our dime. He comes racing to the water. I got one. Who wants to shoot dice for it? He was crazy. Not me. I always lost. I tried shooting dice a couple of times. I always lost. I figured, no way. No way.
Did you lose every time too?
Yeah, he lost every time. They weren't cheating him either. They weren't cheating him. He just had bad luck. I've only what happened. There was one guy. I'll tell you this. I think it's funny. He was wounded in the face and lost his eye. He and I stole our clothes one night from the hospital. And we went out and passed. And we went to a pub. And we're talking, sitting there talking. And he says to me, he wants to get back to this country because he wants to get big enough to buy the sheriff. His father was a moonshiner in North Carolina, and he used to run liquor from his father's still down to town to deliver it. And he says he got stopped one time by the sheriff. He had abandoned the car. I guess they were unregistered cars. Or he'd drive out in the field and run like the dickens. And he said, if I get enough money, I can buy the sheriff. Here, I'm looking forward to going back to college, and he's looking forward to being able to buy the sheriff and run his liquor. I wonder if he ever made it. I met some great people in the service. Really did.
Okay, so we're gonna have to wrap this up now. So how did you feel about the war, like, overall? Were you, like, proud that you fought in it?
I'm very proud. I'm very active in a group today, an 82nd Airborne group. We meet in Buffalo once a month, and I'm in charge of membership. I've done other things in the group. And it's guys, some of whom I've never served with, but who were in my kind of unit since World War II up to the present, you know. So we have that much in common, and I'm very proud of this service. One of the biggest experiences of my life, now that I lived through it. You don't know those things, but no, I'm proud, very proud. In fact, if they played the right music, I'd go again. But I'm afraid if they look at me and start laughing, old man like me, what the heck did you do, you know? I think I'd be scared at this time, though. But I don't know.
Have you been watching the war now a lot?
I'm a fan of war movies, too. I love, I go, ooh, yeah, I don't know how to, and it's amazing how you can get up and the bullets are flying and go. Just go. And I read books and I read about some of these guys and they lived the whole war, what they went through. And other guys, I told you, a friend of mine got hit on the way in. You never know, do you? Never know. Or the guy that was on the fantail of the ship coming home, North Atlantic, brutal weather. In fact, they made us all stay down below decks. It was so bad, afraid to wash overboard. He was a sailor assigned to the rear gun, back deck, I guess, of this merchant ship. And he was washed overboard. Of course, if you go overboard, you're done. They don't pick you up. Too rough, can't see you. He'd be dead probably in a minute anyway. But he grabbed on and they found him hanging on with one hand. I was there when I pulled him in. Never saw a guy shake so much. He shakes from cold and fear. It was close. Because he went into that water that it was so rough, the waves were 30 feet high. I mean, you don't see anybody. You know? Okay, that was good. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed talking with you. I didn't brag too much, did I?
No.
I didn't do anything great. I really didn't.
You risked your life.
Pardon?
You risked your life for the country.
Yes, I did. Yeah. That's why they like young people. The young people figure they're invincible. Nothing can happen, but it can happen. Of course, it was a different circumstance then. We were attacked, and we were threatened. I beat the telegram wall my mother got by 2 hours. Well, if she'd gotten that telegram before I had my letter arrived. I have the telegram. She saved it. War Department requests to inform you your son, Private First Class Joseph Oberkrieser, was severely wounded in action against the enemy. It's a scary one. But I beat him by 2 hours. I wrote a letter. It took about 2 weeks for the telegram to get there, and I beat him. I don't know how much of my letter got through, I'm sure. I tried to explain it. Her prayers were answered. She was always praying. I think I did too. Okay, what do we do now?
When everybody's done, they're gonna have you guys go out there and they're gonna take a big group picture. And
It's only 20